Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.
We were never in a situation where we actually had a negotiation of dollars with Dillard on a time frame which would permit any institution to loan anyone $3.2 million. The time frame was always in a period of 2 to 3 weeks, 6 weeks, and no one is going to loan a bunch of strangers $3.2 million for a medical facility in the times of the Reagan administration.
We bent over backward, believe me, for more than 18 months. But they simply could not come up with the financing, the package. Why, I don't know, but they never came up with it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Hinton.
And I'm Genevieve Stewart. Flint-Goodridge Hospital in New Orleans was once the premier black hospital in the South, and even today still provides quality health care in the black community.
During the next half hour, we'll take a look at the rich history of Flint-Goodridge Hospital and how its service to the black community is now threatened. That and more today on Folks.
Everybody says folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just people all over the world. Folks who live, folks got to give, folks got to care, ooh, folks got to share. Our world is small, so very small. What touches one of all, ooh, touches us all. To stay alive, just to survive, folks got to be in harmony. Everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks, everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks.
This is Flint-Goodridge Hospital in New Orleans. Since the late 19th century, it has been the cornerstone of black medical care in Louisiana. The hospital is owned by Dillard University. The university has agreed to sell the hospital to NME, National Medical Enterprises, one of this nation's largest medical chains. However, the final say-so is contingent on federal and state approval, and that's expected within the next 6 months.
The impending sale has outraged many of the doctors who work here. You see, they had hoped to buy the hospital, but could not come up with the money. Money, along with determination and political strategy, were the necessary factors in opening Flint's doors back in the 1880s. These same factors are needed today to keep Flint-Goodridge Hospital a black institution. In 1869, Straight College in New Orleans, one of the first black colleges in the South, made known its intention to open a medical school. But the move was blocked by the Louisiana Supreme Court. Political strategies changed, and a year or so later, New Orleans University, another black institution, announced in its charter plans to open a medical school. State approval was granted, but grudgingly. We can only speculate that the school's approval was due in part to the efforts of then Lieutenant Governor C.C. Antoine and Secretary of State P.G. DeLande. Both men were black and signed the university's charter in 1873. However, the dream of opening the medical school's doors was still 16 years down the road, while the struggle for funding ensued. While efforts were continuing to launch a medical school, a group of black women began working to open a training school for nurses. The women ran into some financial difficulties, but soon New Orleans University came to the rescue.
You see, the university was able to secure funding for both schools. John Flint of Massachusetts funded the medical college, and the family of Sarah Goodrich funding the nursing school. Hence, in 1889, New Orleans University opened Flint Medical College and the Sarah Goodrich Nurse Training School. But soon major stumbling blocks got in the way. Students had been promised access to Charity Hospital to practice clinical medicine, but such access was never permitted. In 1900, the federal government provided the university with a teaching hospital adjoining the medical college on Canal Street. However, the 20-bed facility was insufficient for training 65 medical students and 16 nursing students. In 1910, the American Medical Association withdrew its accreditation, but Flint-Goodridge Hospital remained open. In 1929, New Orleans University and Strait College merged to form Dillard University, and Dillard became the new owner of the hospital. At the time, New Orleans had the highest black mortality rate among America's largest cities, attributed mostly to deadly diseases from unsanitary living conditions. A larger hospital was definitely needed.
Under Dillard University, the hospital's board of directors launched a fundraising drive to build a new facility. In 1932, the new Flint-Goodridge Hospital opened its doors on Louisiana Avenue. Albert Dent, an Atlanta businessman, was named superintendent even though he had no experience in hospital organization and administration. Dent conceived a postgraduate internship program for blacks. It attracted physicians from all across the country. For example, Dr. Urban Mays, Dr. Isidore Cohen, Dr. Rivers Fredericks, and Dr. William Adams, who joined the Flint-Goodridge staff back in 1929 and was on hand when the hospital moved to its present location.
The hospital did need to expand. It was too crowded down there. There was no space for expansion. The Methodist Church and the Congregational Church had some discourse, and they made up their minds they could get a piece of property uptown. And the late Bishop R.E. Jones, about whom some of you probably know, was instrumental in getting the land there on the corner of Louisiana Avenue and Ferret and LaSalle Streets. It was a whole block. At that time, it was occupied by an old theater on the downtown corner, and cross paths, just like cow paths, were leading back and forth. So they secured that land, and the Negro Doctors Association also had some money which they put into it. It became a training center for interns who came to the city, and because we were at that time woefully short of well-trained black doctors, as were the white population too. So we set the place up there, and it was a multi-purpose hospital. As I indicated to you a little while ago, it had all the services that any general hospital has.
During the days of Jim Crowism, Flint-Goodridge Hospital was the only hospital in Louisiana where black physicians could practice medicine. At Charity Hospital and a few other state-owned institutions, black patients were placed in C and W wards. The colored wards were often located in a cold, damp basement. Flint-Goodridge was the only salvation for black patients.
The hospital has served Louisiana admirably. Just ask Dr. Joseph Labat, chief of staff at Flint-Goodridge and a New Orleans native.
Well, Flint-Goodridge as a child was a mecca for medical care for the black patient in New Orleans. I was born there in 1937, and it was probably you would say it was the only hospital where the private pay patient could receive services. The other hospitals as a child, and during my childhood years, were segregated, and we had no access to care in the other institutions of the city. Flint-Goodridge, when I returned to the city, was a very viable institution. It was undergoing some changes at that time, promulgated mostly by the entrance of a greater number of younger minority physicians into the New Orleans community. Along about 1971, I must maybe update it a little bit. In 1970, the first medical school graduates were finishing their training at the local institutions. So it was just about those years when we started to get locally trained black physicians settling in the New Orleans environment.
But about a year and a half ago, Dillard University decided to sell the hospital.
We have put a lot of money in Flint-Goodridge Hospital. In fact, over the last 18 months, we have put more than $2 million in terms of operating money from Dillard University. We simply can't afford it. So it's primarily economic reason. There's another reason, however, and that is Dillard is an institution of higher learning. We're committed to life of the mind, nurturing young people to develop that mind. We simply cannot afford the time and energy and the resources to devote to hospital administration. So we want to get out of that field and devote all our time and energies and resources to the whole business of higher education. So there are two reasons, economic and professional or vocational.
For a number of years, the trustees had been alerted to the fact that the business side of Flint Hospital was slipping, and there need to be some corrections made. And I want you to understand that the doctors have nothing to do with that. We don't hire anybody, we don't fire anybody. And I think to some extent our records will show that what I'm saying can be documented. A little later on, when the hospital began to slip financially on account of an overload of Medicaid patients, about which you know well, and the fact that Medicaid and Medicare do not pay a full complement of the patient's expenses, only a percentage. Some of the poor people who came in there could not get enough money to pay their balances. And so we accumulated a constant deficit, which has been the case with hospitals all around the nation. So there's nothing pertinent to Flint Hospital alone. It is a common hospital problem.
When Dillard University announced its plans to sell Flint-Goodridge Hospital, approximately 50 black physicians got together to form Doctors Hospital Group Incorporated. The doctors had hoped to buy the hospital, to preserve its heritage, and to continue its service to the black community. However, the doctors ran into some problems, the biggest one being money.
Our attempt to secure finances from the New Orleans financial community has been nothing short of a dilemma. We had 50 men at first, and of course, through the course of discussions and negotiations, that number has fallen. But even in the beginning phases of this project, when we had 50 men and the numbers were in the range of $3.2 million, everywhere we went to seek finances, it seems as though the door was closed. We were never in a situation where we actually had a negotiation of dollars with Dillard on a time frame which would permit any institution to loan anyone $3.2 million. The time frame was always in a period of 2 to 3 weeks, 6 weeks, and no one is going to loan a bunch of strangers $3.2 million for a medical facility in the times of the Reagan administration. It was almost an impossible task based on the time frames that we had to work with.
We negotiated with them for more than 18 months. We gave them every possible break. We gave them preferential treatment. There's everything possible. We wanted them to have it because we wanted the hospital to remain within the black community because of its symbolism and its historic contribution. But we can't simply give it away. We got too much invested in there because after all, this money comes from the Dillard University operating budget. So the doctors talked a great deal. They talked a great game, but they never put up any money. They never put up one dime in terms of a commitment. I said we bent over backward, believe me, for more than 18 months. But they simply could not come up with the financing, the package. Why, I don't know, but they never came up with it.
During the last 7 to 8 years, the management problem of the economic side of Flint-Goodridge Hospital has been very grossly out of gear. And I think everybody up there knows that. Some changes have been made. And since those changes have been made, the economic side of the hospital has improved remarkably. During the last 4 to 5 months, since new management has been instituted, why the hospital not only has broken even, but has made a profit. And I call the attention of the trustees to that in a letter which was formulated by me and signed by the doctors on the staff group, that you just well keep it now since it's making money and you don't have to lose it, and it can keep its head afloat. And some of the things that have got it in good shape have been some of the very things we advocated as much as 6 or 7 years ago. But apparently we went like St. John's voice howling in the wilderness. Nobody paid attention to it.
We understand that under the administrative management of Dillard's business personnel, the hospital has turned a profit in recent months, and in spite of that fact, Dillard wouldn't reconsider maintaining ownership.
Well, not a profit, not over the long haul. Over the long haul, we're still losing money. For the first time, we have broken even, I suppose, since Mr. Teamer has taken over. But when you have a deficit of, say, $2 million over the past couple of years, you have to run faster and harder, and you're still behind. And you look at it over a long period of time, we've just lost too much money in Flint-Goodridge. So even if you break even, if you turn it around somewhat, you're still operating in the hole, and we are. And we simply can't afford it. Flint-Goodridge is bleeding us to death. We regret it very much. We'd love to keep it. But economically, we simply cannot afford it.
As an esteemed political scientist, I'm asking Dr. Cook, the political scientist, not President Cook, president of Dillard University. Don't you feel that our black institutions are eroding and that Flint-Goodridge Hospital is a prime example of this?
There's no question about it. But you see, and there's a sadness about it. I have anguish. And I did my best, Dillard University did its best to keep it within the black community. But you know, Mrs. Stewart, blackness has a price. And if blacks are not willing to pay the price to retain ownership and control of an institution as significant as Flint-Goodridge Hospital, then what can be done? The answer is nothing. Why haven't blacks, what are the indications that blacks have not been willing to pay the price? Not only because the doctors and other groups did not buy the hospital, but also because of the low patient load at Flint-Goodridge Hospital. Here's a 128-bed facility. At the moment, in spite of all the blacks who are in the hospital at the moment in New Orleans, less than 30 are in Flint-Goodridge. Now, if that's the case, how essential is Flint-Goodridge to the health care of New Orleans? Blacks. Secondly, black doctors, like white doctors, have not put their patients in Flint-Goodridge Hospital, especially their paying patients. About 90% of the patients in Flint-Goodridge are Medicare and Medicaid patients. You simply cannot run a hospital with that disproportionate number of individuals, largely indigent. See, when integration came, white doctors put their black patients in the essentially white hospitals. And this is exactly what black doctors have done. They have put their paying patients in white hospitals where they have privileges, of course, where the doctors have privileges, practicing privileges. Thirdly, Mrs. Stewart, there is a syndrome, as you know, in terms of black middle-class consciousness. Many of them look down upon black institutions, whether black colleges, or whether black churches, or whether black hospitals. They prefer white hospitals. And so many blacks will not go to Flint-Goodridge, not only because of medical consideration, but also because Flint-Goodridge is a symbol of the echoes and the cries and the heartaches of black people.
We do not have that as a problem as much as we used to have, because a lot of the doctors who one time were not bringing their patients there are now realizing, in fact, they just will bring them there because they get the same kind of consideration they get anywhere else.
Now that Dillard has signed an agreement to sell Flint-Goodridge to National Medical Enterprises, there is concern about the impact the sale will have on the black community.
It will probably mean the loss of some 150, 200 jobs in a time when jobs are scarce and hard to go by anywhere. The people who work at Flint Hospital would have to go somewhere else to try to find a job. It also means that the one attractive setup in the strictly black neighborhood would be gone. And there are no doubt countless thousands of black children who would have nothing to look up to, nothing to look forward to, something they could say that one of these days I can be part of this thing, because they just can't do it if the building's gone, the whole institution's gone. I think it'll have a bad effect on the black morale, too, by the way, because everybody likes to feel like they own something. Well, the Jews own Tour Infirmary, and they can look up to that. The Baptists own Baptist Hospital there, and the Baptists can look up to that. The Catholics own 2 hospitals here, and the Methodists have one way down the lower town. Well, what do the blacks have to look up to? Suppose you take this out. They have nothing to look forward to, and it simply deflates their ego and makes them think that. One of the people on the trustee board want to know why the doctors want to run a hospital anyhow. It's a losing proposition. Well, the doctors don't want to run the hospital. All they want to do is to practice in the hospital to survive. And I dare say that those who ask that question would not think it nice if you say, why do you want a courthouse? One of them's a lawyer. Why not get rid of the courthouses? It's the same thing. That's the reason why.
Dr. Adams, what effect will this sale of Flint-Goodridge Hospital have on your practice?
Well, it would make it necessary for me to find some other place to practice. I am a fellow of the American Society of Abdominal Surgeons, a recognized surgical specialty group. And I should not have any trouble practicing anywhere else where they'll accept me. But inasmuch as staff privileges in hospitals around the city are now scrutinized very carefully, it is possible that I might not get a chance to practice the type of work that I do at Flint Hospital. That's number one. It's also true that so far as availability of hospital beds is concerned, that there may be a decreasing number of beds available for our type of work because, as you no doubt know, hospital beds have come to be a high priority. It would be easy for someone to tell you that, well, you're acceptable here, but you can't get a patient in here. Now, I know of cases where some of our black doctors have tried to get patients in the hospital and couldn't get them in there. Whether or not it is always because the place is overcrowded or not, we can't tell because we have no way of ascertaining that. But it would be difficult for me now to change my format because the patients I've been treating for so many years have been accustomed to going to Flint. That's where they want to go, and that's where they still go. They go there because they're satisfied with the results. And you may bet your bottom dollar, if they're not receiving good treatment, they wouldn't go.
Many of us have staff privileges at other institutions in the city, in which case it will not affect us directly. There are other men on the staff that do not have staff privileges at other institutions. And in some instances, it may relegate them to an office practice. There are men that are approaching the retirement years that have depended upon Flint-Goodridge as a place to practice. And it is possible that they will be denied this basic right to practice in the style in which they have been accustomed to through the years. And this, to me, is a horrible experience.
And what about the nurses?
Right now I have mixed feelings about the sale of the hospital, and I have very little to say. It's a loss to the black community, and as long as it's kept as a hospital and we are able to keep our employees here, I feel pretty good about that. And as long as we're able to give quality care to our patients, that's my main concern. From all I can see, and we are going right along each day doing our work and taking care of patients, we're not worrying about what's happening downstairs in administration.
As for the future of Flint-Goodridge Hospital, only National Medical Enterprises knows for sure. We tried to talk to representatives from NME, but they have been unavailable for comment. But they have assured representatives at Dillard University that things here at Flint would remain pretty much the same.
Current plans call for the use of Flint-Goodridge as a general hospital, operating pretty much as it is, although obviously under new management and control and supervision. But Flint-Goodridge will operate as a general hospital in the same location, and significantly, the firm has agreed to retain, as far as possible, all the current employees, especially technical ones, but all the employees, and to help them find jobs, those who are released. So it's good for everybody all around, I think, but it's going to remain as a hospital. Now, what will happen over the long run, no one can say. Suppose it doesn't pan out, then they might do otherwise. But we have a commitment now that the hospital will operate as a general hospital within the black community for the foreseeable future.
They have told us that they will maintain the institution in its present location and in its basic present form. Here again, this is a play on words, and only the future will determine whether or not they will develop Flint into the quality institution that we wanted to see developed, or whether or not they will take the beds, as we surmise that they will do, and relocate these beds to other medical facilities in the metropolitan New Orleans area.
Dr. Adams, are you proud to be associated with Flint-Goodridge Hospital?
I most certainly am. I have no feelings of inferiority about Flint Hospital, whatever. If I thought we were doing something wrong, doing something inadequate, doing something unscientific, I'd be the first person to howl about it. Because I don't consider medicine as a black profession, or I, as a black doctor, I am a doctor of medicine and general surgeon. And that goes for here and everywhere else in the world. Some people have an idea that they should feel inferior. I don't feel inferior. I wasn't brought up that way. I feel that when I do a job, I can stand behind it. And if I wasn't going to stand behind it, I'd have been sued upside down back by now. I have never had a suit against me for malpractice except once, and I won that one.
How do you feel after selling a famous piece of black history?
I feel very good about it, overall. Now, of course, there is a degree of sadness about it. Here is an institution that has meant so much in terms of black community since 1896. That has been a symbol of the genius of black people that's provided medical care. Prior to integration, blacks are going on the two institutions for hospitalization, and that's Charity, which was public, and Flint-Goodridge, which was private. And to get to a situation where that's no longer the case, where you lose Flint-Goodridge, there's a degree of sadness, there's an anguish involved. But in this world, you do what you have to do. We tried to sell it to the doctors and other groups in the black community. We did our best. we struggled, we bent over. Under those circumstances, when the black community did not come to our aid and support it, what could we do? And the answer is we could do only what we did. And so we did it, and I'm very pleased, very proud.
As we close our report, some final words about the quality of medical care at Flint-Goodridge Hospital. Almost everyone we talked to said the quality of medical care was equal to that at other hospitals in the New Orleans area. But Dr. Cook, president of Dillard University, says the quality of medical care at Flint-Goodridge has declined since integration, not because of the doctors. Dr. Cook says Flint-Goodridge has top-flight physicians on its staff, but because of the lack of money and community support.
We hope you have enjoyed our report. We feel Flint-Goodridge definitely has a rich history with a new chapter yet to unfold. We'd like to know your thoughts about the program. Please send your comments to folks in care of Louisiana Public Broadcasting, 2618 Wooddale Boulevard, Baton Rouge, 70805. Next week, we'll take a look at the role of blacks in education along with Louisiana's current teacher shortage and the effect that shortage will have on the education of black children. Until that time, so long.
Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.